My family thought they had left my grandfather with no options. They abandoned him in a cold hospital lobby with a signed discharge order, a small bag of belongings, and nothing but empty promises from the people who were supposed to care for him. They claimed they were too busy managing his affairs to pick him up. They assumed someone else would step in. Or worse, they thought he would simply sit there, old, tired, and helpless. I was on duty at my military base 190 miles away when I got the call. I dropped everything. I got in my car and drove without stopping. But when I finally reached the hospital and helped my grandfather into the passenger seat, he didn't ask me to take him home. He grabbed my arm with surprising strength, leaned toward me and whispered 3 words that changed everything. Take me to my lawyer. My name is Margaret Hayes. I'm 34 years old and I've served in the active duty military for the past 12 years. In the military, you learn quickly that loyalty isn't something you offer only when it's convenient. It's a promise, a commitment you keep when things get difficult. And that commitment was tested on a scorching Tuesday afternoon. I was on duty at the base when my phone rang. The number had a Sacramento area code that I didn't recognize. When I answered, a nurse from St. Jude's Hospital spoke in a careful, uneasy voice. She told me that my 82-year-old grandfather, Arthur, had been cleared for discharge 4 hours earlier. His doctor had signed the paperwork. But Arthur was still sitting alone in the main hospital lobby. The staff had called my uncle and aunt several times. They lived less than 10 minutes away and had promised to take care of him. Both of them ignored the calls. When the hospital finally reached them, they claimed they were too busy handling family affairs to come pick him up. The nurse's voice lowered. They said someone else would figure it out. Something inside me went cold. I requested emergency leave, grabbed my keys and headed straight for Sacramento. The drive was more than 190 miles. I didn't stop once. My grandfather had raced me when no one else would. He was a quiet, proud man who had always been there for me. And while he had been sick, I had watched my relatives slowly isolate him, making decisions around him and treating him like he no longer had a voice. They thought he was alone. They were about to learn how wrong they were. When I finally pulled into the hospital parking lot, my engine was still hot from the drive. I rushed through the sliding doors and into the main lobby. And there he was. Arthur sat alone in a vinyl chair looking smaller than I remembered. A thin plastic bag rested beside him, holding the few belongings the hospital had returned. But the moment he saw me, something changed. That familiar spark returned to his eyes. I hurried over and wrapped my arms around him. I'm here, Grandpa, I said. Let's get you home. I helped him to his feet and kept my arm around his shoulders as we walked to my car. He slowly lowered himself into the passenger seat and released a long breath. I closed his door, walked around the front of the car and climbed behind the wheel. I reached toward the ignition. Then his hand closed around my forearm. His fingers were thin but his grip was strong. I turned toward him. He leaned closer, his voice low but completely clear. Don't take me home, Margaret. I stared at him. What? Take me to my lawyer. For a moment I thought I had misunderstood him. Your lawyer? Grandpa, you just got out of the hospital. You need to rest. I'll rest when this is finished. There was something in his eyes that made me stop arguing. Then he told me the truth. While he had been lying in that hospital room, my uncle and aunt hadn't been busy with work. They had gone to his house. They had changed the locks. And they were using an old power of attorney to try to take control of his property before he could get home. My stomach dropped. They hadn't forgotten to pick him up. They had left him there on purpose. They needed more time. More time to take everything they believed belonged to them. They think I'm helpless, Arthur said quietly. Then he reached into the inside pocket of his coat and pulled out an old black leather ledger. They have no idea what I've been keeping from them. I started the car. We drove straight to his attorney's office in downtown Sacramento. By the time we arrived, the sun was beginning to disappear behind the buildings. Mr. Vance, my grandfather's longtime estate attorney, was waiting for us. Arthur had called him from my car and he had kept the office open after hours. Inside we sat in a quiet, wood-paneled office. Arthur carefully placed the black leather ledger on Mr. Vance's desk. Then he pulled out a sealed manila envelope he had kept hidden inside his coat throughout his entire hospital stay. Mr. Vance opened his laptop and looked at my grandfather. Arthur, your children filed emergency paperwork with the county clerk yesterday. He adjusted his glasses. They're claiming you no longer have the mental capacity to manage your affairs. They're trying to use the 2018 power of attorney to take control of your properties. Arthur gave a quiet laugh. Let them try. Then he looked directly at Mr. Vance. They don't know about the trust, do they? Mr. Vance's expression changed into a thin smile. Not a word. Arthur turned toward me. Months earlier he had noticed small amounts of money disappearing from his accounts. At first he said nothing. Then he began noticing other things. Questions about his health. Private conversations between my uncle and aunt. Documents appearing that he had never approved. Slowly he realized what they were planning. They wanted to declare him incapable. They wanted control of everything. But my grandfather hadn't reacted with panic. He had reacted with strategy. Quietly and with Mr. Vance's help he had moved his major independent assets into an irrevocable trust. Arthur slid several documents across the desk toward me. Everything they think they're taking, Margaret, he said, is already gone. I looked down at the papers. The house. The investment accounts. The properties. Everything they believed they were fighting over had already been legally moved beyond their reach. They're grabbing at ghosts, Arthur said calmly. Then Mr. Vance opened the sealed envelope. And what was inside was about to turn my uncle and aunt's entire plan against them. We arrived at my grandfather's house shortly after 8 that evening. The driveway was packed with cars. Uncle Richard's expensive SUV sat near the front steps, while Aunt Clara's sedan was parked beside it. Every light inside the large house was blazing, spilling across the perfectly maintained lawn. They weren't searching for Arthur. They weren't worried about where he was. They were celebrating. I turned off the engine and looked at my grandfather. Are you ready for this, Grandpa? Arthur sat up straighter. Despite everything that had happened, his chin lifted with the same quiet pride I had known my entire life. I've been ready for months, Margaret, he said. Let's take back my home. I stepped out of the car and helped him to his feet. Still wearing my military uniform, I walked beside him toward the front door. The heavy mahogany door wasn't even locked. When I pushed it open, the entire room froze. The dining table was covered with champagne bottles, takeout containers, and stacks of financial documents. Richard stood near the table with a glass of wine in his hand. Clara was marking papers with sticky notes. My cousins sat on the sofa, scrolling through property listings on their phones. They had already started planning what to do with my grandfather's home. Then Arthur walked in. The silence was immediate. Richard stared at us in disbelief. For a moment no one moved. Then his shock turned into a smug smile. Margaret, what are you doing here? He asked. And how did you get him out of the hospital? He barely looked at me before turning toward Arthur. Dad, you shouldn't even be standing. You're sick. He stepped closer. We're just putting together your care plan. The doctors agree that you need proper care, so we're handling things for you. Claire quickly nodded. Everything is under control, Dad. You don't need to worry about the house or the business anymore. Arthur said nothing. He simply stood beside me watching them. Then the front door opened again. Mr. Vance walked inside carrying a thick leather briefcase. 2 county sheriff's deputies followed behind him. The color drained from Clara's face. Richard's smile disappeared. What is this? Richard demanded. This is a private family matter. We have power of attorney. Mr. Vance calmly placed his briefcase on the table. You had power of attorney, Mr. Hayes. He opened the case and removed a stack of official documents. It was revoked earlier today. Richard's face tightened. Mr. Vance continued. And the 2018 document you attempted to use yesterday has been flagged for possible fraud. Clara stepped backward. Fraud, she shouted. That's ridiculous. We're his children. We have rights to his estate. Mr. Vance looked directly at her. You don't own any part of this property. The room went silent again. 6 months ago, Arthur transferred this home, the lake property, and his major assets into an irrevocable trust. He placed another document on the table. As of today, Margaret Hayes is the sole trustee. Richard stared at me. Then he turned slowly toward Arthur. But my grandfather wasn't finished. He stepped forward, resting one hand lightly on his cane. And there's something else you missed while you were busy going through my office. Richard's expression changed. Arthur looked him directly in the eye. To protect the trust, additional financial obligations were attached to the properties. If you attempt to claim ownership through your old filings, those obligations may become your responsibility. Richard's face went pale. For the first time that night he looked genuinely afraid. He turned toward Clara. She stared back at him. Then the room exploded into panic. Clara dropped into a dining chair and covered her face. Richard grabbed the documents and began flipping through them desperately, searching for something, anything that could save them. But there was nothing. Their plan had already collapsed. "You can't do this to us, Dad," Richard shouted. His confident voice was gone. "We're your family. We were trying to protect our future." Arthur's expression hardened. "No. You were protecting your greed." Richard went silent. "You left me alone in a hospital lobby because you thought I couldn't fight back. You changed the locks on my home and tried to take control of everything I spent my life building." Arthur paused. "You chose money over family." Mr. Vance stepped forward. "Deputies, please ask everyone except Arthur and Margaret to leave the property." The deputies moved toward Richard, Clara, and my cousins. They were given time to collect their personal belongings, while Mr. Vance made it clear that anything belonging to the trust had to remain in the house. 30 minutes earlier they had been celebrating. Now they were walking out in silence. Richard's arrogance was gone. Clara wouldn't even look at my grandfather. My cousins quietly put down their phones and followed their parents outside. One by one their cars disappeared into the night. And finally the house became quiet. I called a locksmith and had every lock and entry code changed. Mr. Vance began the process of securing the affected accounts and protecting the trust. For the first time in years my grandfather's home was truly safe. 2 weeks later, Arthur moved into a bright, peaceful cottage just 10 minutes from my military post. He filled the shelves with his favorite books. He planted flowers in the small garden outside. And in the afternoons he sat on the porch reading quietly, finally enjoying the peace he deserved. As for Richard and Clara, the consequences of their actions followed them. Without access to Arthur's money, their plans fell apart. They were left dealing with legal expenses and the financial damage caused by their own failed scheme. But Arthur never celebrated their downfall. He simply moved on. And watching him I realized something important. 12 years in the military taught me that real strength isn't about money, power, or control. It's about loyalty. It's about duty. And it's about standing beside the people who stood beside you when you had no one else. My grandfather gave me a home when I needed one most. So when he needed me, driving 190 miles to bring him home wasn't a sacrifice. It was the easiest decision I ever made. Because family isn't always the people who share your blood. Sometimes, family is the person who shows up when everyone else walks away. So what would you have done? Would you have given Richard and Clara another chance? Or would you have walked away and let them face the consequences of their own choices? Share your thoughts in the comments, and if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and check out the next family drama story.